We're going to bring up a guest in a few minutes, folks, that you do not want to miss. Chris Briels. Now, if you don't know who he is, he was the fire marshal in Oregon that caught the FBI dressed as, we'll say, militiamen, trying to stir up trouble and cause problems. We're going to bring one tonight, let him tell his story on what he found out. And I have to say, this man's a rare breed that he would do what he did. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you just had surgery on your shoulder and things, and you've been kind of covered up with a lot of things going on, but thanks for taking time to talk to us tonight.
Yes, sir.
Tell the folks a little bit about yourself, Chris. For those that don't know who you are, tell them about yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
My name's Chris Briels. I'm 63 years old. I was born in Denver, Colorado, raised in Colorado, moved out here in 1978 to raise my family, and I've been here since 1978.
Have you lived in Harney County all that time?
Yes, sir, I have.
You've been a resident there for quite a while then, obviously, over 40 years, so you've been there long enough to know what's going on and the people around there. What are the people like generally in Harney County? What kind of people are they? I know a lot of them are ranchers probably and farmers, but what kind of folks are they?
They're usually pretty independent people. You need to understand that Harney County is a little over 10,500 square miles, and there's about 5,500 people living in the Burns-Hines area, and the rest of them are scattered out over the county. So it's a very remote area. It's kind of like a frontier. There's a lot of places you can go that you just don't see anybody.
And I kind of like that. I really do. I like that thought. I live out here in the woods by myself. I've been blessed, and I like it down here in the holler where I live. But anyway, what have you done for a living most of your life? What's been your background in that?
You mean as far as
what'd you do for work?
Since I was in Harney County, I came here as a welder, a millwright. I joined the Burns Volunteer Fire Department in 1979, and in 1984 I took over as the full-time paid fire chief for the city of Burns, and I was asked to be the Harney County Fire Marshal at that time by Judge Dale White, who's deceased now. I did that position until just recently when I quit. I retired from the city of Burns in 2006. I've been involved in search and rescue for the last 20-some-odd years. I've taught fire classes around the state of Oregon for the State Fire Marshal's office. I've helped train a lot of firefighters and EMTs.
You've been a public servant for a long time then. You've been in public service, actually, teaching people, helping people for a long time. Yes,
sir, I have. I feel like I have things that I can do to help my fellow man, and so that's what I've been doing.
Were you an active fire marshal when the incident happened to you a couple weeks ago? Were you still a fire marshal then?
Yes, sir.
And still the fire marshal of Harney County, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You resigned, of course, after that. So, folks, you get a background where this guy come from. He's not a rookie. He's been on the job doing a lot of things for a lot of years. Obviously, Chris, up until this time, you must have thought everything was pretty kosher in that county. I mean, everything was going along the way it should?
Oh, not always going the way it should, but I thought it was going along pretty good.
What made you change your mind? Tell us what happened.
Well, when Ammon Bundy first came into Harney County and had a meeting out at the fairgrounds.
But you're familiar with what happened to the Bundys about a year and a half ago when they're in Nevada, right? You knew about that, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
What was your opinion on that?
I kind of wondered how it was that they could do what they did and the federal government went away and hasn't bothered them since. So it made me think they must have had something on the federal government. They must have had a leg to stand on, and I was curious as to what had gone on.
Had you been in contact with anybody from there before this happened?
No, not before this happened, no.
Go ahead and finish your story.
Just when Ammon came here and he was going to be speaking about our Constitution and some of the things that had happened down at the Bundy Ranch, and I went with a group of maybe 65 people from Harney County that listened to what he had to say about the Constitution and about our founding fathers and a lot of really interesting history and about what had happened to them down at their ranch, and that there were some similarities here that had happened to the Hammonds at the Hammond Ranch, that our founding fathers had put checks and balances in the Constitution to keep the government under control. And part of that, they could develop a committee of safety, and they could have an evidentiary hearing and check into matters that didn't seem like they were quite right. And there's been a lot of BLM land takeover here in Harney County. Right now, we're 73% federally owned land.
Wow.
We were the highest per capita paid county in the state, and now we're second from the last. We used to have a tremendous lumber industry and a lot of things going on. They've shut all the logging down. The BLM has taken over more and more land. They've taken over ranchers' properties. Whenever they buy ranches or do whatever, that takes it out of the tax base. It's really hurt our economy, and the jobs are just not there unless you work for the federal government.
Well, now, are you familiar with Agenda 21? Ever heard of that?
Not completely.
Okay, well, later on we'll talk to you off the air sometime. But Agenda 21 is what this is all about, taking over properties to get people off of it, but it's a long story. Nonetheless, you saw this happening. Did anyone else that worked with you, I mean, the local law enforcement or the judge, did they see it? Were they concerned about it at all?
They didn't seem to be too concerned about it. When the Hammonds were arrested, they didn't really support the Hammonds. They didn't go to bat for them. Right, that our own people were going to jail for crimes that did not warrant the amount of punishment that they were receiving.
Did you speak to anybody about that, like the judge perhaps? I know you know who he is and there's local sheriffs. When you spoke to him about that, was there any response at all?
When I talked to them about what's going on with the Hammonds, they said, well, everybody wants to see the Hammonds out of jail, and it's an unfortunate circumstance, but there's nothing that we can do. They didn't have an interest in helping.
Placate the people. Oh, we love to help, and you're right, but it's out of our hands. Oh, my. Anyway, I won't get into that. You started seeing this some time back. This didn't just start happening a month ago. You've been seeing it for a while.
Yes, sir. At the meeting at the fairgrounds, we were talked to about the Committee of Safety, and they voted to form a Committee of Safety. I was the second person nominated to sit on the executive board of the Committee of Safety. There were 7 nominated that night. And we didn't have any idea what we were getting into. I never raised my hand saying I want to be famous. I just felt like something needed to be done. And if nobody ever does anything, then that's what gets done is nothing.
Sure.
And I thought it sounded like a very important thing to be involved in. I had heard that the committee would have the power to call a militia if it was needed. And I wanted to make sure that no one was going to be calling militia and going to have a bloodbath in my county without my say-so. I don't believe in bloodshed. I don't condone those types of things.
Well, you don't want bloodshed. That's the last thing you want is bloodshed.
Right.
Or any other, we'll say, officials there with you, any law enforcement or anybody else work for the county or the federal government there with you?
There were a couple other law enforcement people there, but nobody else was on the committee.
How did the law enforcement respond to the meeting?
They basically said that I should probably remove myself from the committee and get as far away from the Bundys as possible because they were a bad group.
This was told you by the local law enforcement or by feds?
Local law enforcement
Okay.
and by Fasty himself.
And by who himself?
Judge Fasty himself.
Okay. Chris, don't go away. A lot more to talk about, folks. And we'll try to squeeze in a couple phone calls next half hour if you want to talk to us. This is beyond powerful. This is the kind of man we need. Men like this all over the country. Folks, we're talking to a man tonight, exceptional character. I mean, really. Now, I want you all to think, how many of y'all would resign from your position, from a job you've done for years? I'm sure, decent pay, good benefits. Walked off and said, I'm not going to do it any longer, with threats given to you by the judge and other people. How many of y'all would do that? And I'm asking a serious question here. I mean, you walk away from your livelihood. What if you got families? What if you got a wife and children to feed? Mortgage to pay or bills to pay? What kind of people, what kind of man does it take to say, listen, I can't do this any longer. I see it's wrong, and I will not do it any longer. That, to me, is a man of integrity, and I love to see this man face to face and shake his hand. I wish he wasn't so far away. Now, Chris, you said that the judge told you also maybe you might want to rethink this?
Yeah, he told me that the Committee of Safety was not done correctly, that it was a farce, and that I should distance myself from it as far as I could, and that my life would probably be in danger and all kinds of things. And I had told him, well, I feel strong about this, and I need to find out what's really going on.
And why do you think your life would be in danger? From what?
There's been a lot of things going on, and I don't think that they want them uncovered. Lavoie's already been killed, murdered in cold blood. To get back to my story, that we've had people around town being harassed, vehicles driving around. When Ammon Bundy took the refuge, then the Oregon 3%ers and some Oath Keepers came in. They're militia groups from around the United States. The Idaho 3%ers showed up. but they are not a bad group of people. They are a good group of people. They are good, God-fearing men and women that came to show support for Ammon and his followers and to protect them. And as soon as they got here, the FBI started showing up, and there were all of these black vehicles driving around town, following people, harassing people.
When you say harassing, what do you mean harassing?
Oh, screaming and yelling at them, threatening them.
I mean, you talking about these people driving down the highway or downtown? They were screaming at and yelling at them?
At night, they'd stop across from somebody's place and yell at them and then drive off. And
what would they yell at them?
About how that they were wrong in their convictions about what they were doing, and that they needed to be kind of careful with who they talked to, and just stuff to create fear for people.
These people they were yelling at, they knew they were at meetings or something, perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the sheriff's deputies and stuff like that. Well, after I had talked to some of these Oath Keepers and the 3%ers and told them, we don't need that kind of stuff in our town, they said, absolutely not, and we do not do that. And I believe these men. They are very self-disciplined. They don't do that. They just don't. Why is all of this? I went to a friend of mine's house where I had a vehicle that he was working on, and when I walked in the door, he said that I had aligned myself with the wrong people and that he was upset with me and that some of my cohorts had been messing around the armory building that day. And I said, wait a minute, wait. I haven't aligned myself with anybody. And what do you mean somebody's messing around the armory? The armory is supposed to be empty. There shouldn't be anybody messing around there. Well, he got a phone call, and at that time, he said, well, your cohorts are over there again. You better go find out what they're doing. He poked me in the chest. So I immediately went out and got my vehicle out there. There were 2 cars and one big black Expedition. I followed them down the street. The 2 cars went one way and the black rig went the other way, so I followed them, and they stopped at a stoplight, and when the light turned, they cut across the left-hand lane of traffic.
Hang on to it, don't lose that thought. Folks, you're about ready to hear something that you may well pay attention to. This man has got me on the edge of my seat. Listen to what he's going to tell us now next. I spoke to him during the break, and I asked him this question. I said, did any of the militia at all, at any time, the people there with the Bundys, do anything disrespectful to anybody? He said, absolutely not. And that should tell you something, folks, coming from a guy that will say was on the other side for a long time. Go ahead and finish your comments, Chris, please.
Well, sir, when my friend had told me that my cohorts were at the armory and I followed the vehicle and it cut across the turn lane in an evasive maneuver and went into a parking lot, and they drove around and they stopped by McDonald's, and I got out and I went over and I took my hand to them and I said, my name's Chris Briels, I live here. I'm kind of curious what you guys were doing over at the armory. They told me that their name was Mike and Rick, and I said, what's your last names? As well, we're Mike and Rick. They wouldn't tell me. And I said, I just had a guy that I've known for a long time tell me that you were my cohorts, and I'd like to know what you guys were doing at the armory. And he says, I wasn't at the armory, and you got no business to be following me around. And I said, sir, please be honest with me, because you were at the armory, because I just followed you from the armory. And he said, well, we're just 2 guys traveling through town looking for a place to start a business. And I said, sir, I'd wish you'd be honest with me.
This hour,
typically, people don't start a business in an armory. Please be honest. And the one guy said, well, I just want a sandwich. And I said, well, I'll buy your meal if you guys are honest with me. There's a lot of fear in my community, and people are scared. A lot of activities are going on, and they don't know what's happening. And you were over there where you didn't belong. I just want to know why. The big guy says, well, we're just trying to find a business. That's all we're doing, just passing through town. And then the other guy says, well, to be honest, there was a big buck in the backyard there. It was a big 4-point shooter buck. And he says, wow, he says, boy, what a nice deer. And I said, well, if you're hunters, I can show you where there's thousands of jackrabbits that we can hunt. But I said, typically we don't shoot deer in the armory. And I'd rather you would be honest with me. Please, it's very important to me to find out what is scaring the people in my community. The big guy said, well, I want a sandwich if that's all right with you. And I said, well, okay, you guys have a good day. And I took a picture of the front of their vehicle, and I took it up, and I called the dispatcher. I wasn't able to see the sheriff. They've got our courthouse and our